From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Steny Gray. The nations of the world have voted to end the U.S. blockade against Cuba at the United Nations General Assembly. The vote was 189 for, 2 against, and no abstentions. Only the United States and Israel opposed the resolution. Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez addressed the General Assembly just before the actual vote, where he made an emotional appeal to the member nations to support the lifting of the ban. He explained in his speech how badly the blockade was affecting the lives of millions of Cubans. During the debate, there was near unanimous support for the resolution.
2017, in Cuba, 224 people for every 100,000 inhabitants died because they didn't have access to this treatment due to the embargo. In the past year, more than 30 American companies, such as Agilent, Cook Medical, and Thermo Fisher Scientific, refused to sell to the company Medicuba drugs, supplies, and crucial equipment for our health system, or they didn't respond to our repeated requests. A mother in this room, or a mother on this planet, cannot help but be moved before such cases. Incalculable damage, human damage, has been caused by the blockade, and which is qualified as an act of genocide under Article 2 of the Convention for the Prevention and Sanction of the Crime of Genocide of 1948. And it is also a violation of international humanitarian law. If it were a conflict, we cannot calculate the human suffering, Madam President. The objective of the embargo, anchored in the Cold War, has not changed over time, where it says, and I quote, there is no effective political opposition. The only means possible to have the government lose its internal support is to bring about deceit and discouragement through economic dissatisfaction and shortages. We have to quickly implement every means possible to weaken the economic life of Cuba, denying Cuba money and supplies in order to reduce the real and nominal wages, with a view to creating hunger, despair, as well as the upheaval of the Cuban government. End of quote. And by way of exception, we are pleased by the recent signing under a special license, which has existed since 2016, the recent signing of a mixed company by the marketing agency of the Center of Molecular Immunology of Cuba and the Roswell Park Cancer Center, which will allow the commercialization in the United States of therapeutic vaccines.
And we're now joined live by our correspondent in New York, Jorge Gestoso, who has been closely following this meeting. Hello, Jorge. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us what happened on this very important day for Cuba? Okay, so we seem to be having some technical issues with Jorge Gestoso, so we're going to go back to him a little later on in the program. But other news now, just ahead of the vote, South Africa expressed its solidarity with Cuba. The Deputy House Speaker, Solomon Saloni, called the U.S. imposed blockade unjust, and he says South Africa will never support those measures.
The U.S. blockade of Cuba is unfair. It's not in line with democratic pursuit of each nation's self-determination. It is inappropriate for any one of us, no matter our size, to impose our wishes on others because of the power that we presumably at the moment may conduct. Historically, in the United Nations forums, the majority of countries, and this is a huge majority, have objected to sanctions against Cuba. We remain committed to that.
Dozens of migrants who formed part of the second caravan heading towards Huixla, Mexico, have been detained by federal police and migration officials. Telesur correspondent Pablo Perez is on the ground in Tapachula, and he files this report.
Well, we're standing outside of Tapachula's airport. This is the place where at least 4 buses full with migrants have been taken from the migration offices in Tapachula, where they were detained for a while. Those were migrants marching today from Tapachula to Huixla, and those that were left behind of the big group were like handpicked by the federal police and then delivered to the Mexican migration office. Well, it seems that the police was accusing the migrants, the scattered migrants along the way, that they had crossed the border irregularly or they had committed a minor fault, and so they were to be handed to the National Migration Service, which, well, it's not what they accorded when they crossed the migration office at the Suchiate River in Ciudad Hidalgo. So, well, again, they say that they need to group together at Huixla, and they're hoping to get together with the first caravan that is today at Juchitán, Oaxaca, so they can find safety in numbers.
Even the tiredness from the long walks can't stop the second group of migrants from Honduras heading north through Mexico. They are hoping to catch up with the first caravan, and that's why they start their journey very early each morning.
At night, migrants plan for the day ahead, when they will continue their journey.
We have little time to rest. Look at those people. They are bathing. They are resting because their bodies are in pain and the water helps.
It's difficult for some of them to start the walk at 3 in the morning. Their wounded feet, worn-out shoes, and the lack of food hinder their progress. This caravan is the most ethnically diverse. Although they hail from various countries, they all share the same goal and reasons for migrating.
I
have 3 daughters and I can't support them. The situation in Guatemala is very bad. That is why I joined the caravan.
The first group of the migrant caravan, who entered Mexican territory 10 days ago, want to get to Mexico City.
We should join and form a single caravan. We hope we can meet them, because that way we will be stronger. Central America all together.
There are approximately 390 kilometers between the first and second migrant caravan. They plan to meet in the Mexican capital. The long and hard days don't matter to them. All they want is to join forces with the first caravan so they can be stronger and safer on the road together.
Pablo Pérez García, Telesur, México.
And hundreds of Salvadorians have begun a 4th caravan of migrants heading towards the United States.
From very early in the morning, hundreds of people gathered to begin their own journey towards the United States, in what would be the second caravan that departs from this country. Lucy Peña travels with her 2 teenage children and 2 very young grandchildren.
Poverty forces us to migrate and leave our own country, although sometimes in other countries they believe that we are going to take their jobs. We are only looking for something better for our kids, and that is the reason we are walking.
This second caravan is divided in 3 groups. Some decided to go to the border city of San Cristobal, although most went toward La Chadura. Several walked, but others were helped by drivers to reach their destination.
We brought toothpaste, toothbrushes, we have cookies, non-perishables, and water. We know that the help we are given is not a lot, but it's something compared to not giving them anything at all, and only staying at home and posting things on Facebook or Twitter.
Brochures have been distributed that explain the risks of this irregular migration. Authorities have even identified human traffickers who have infiltrated the caravans.
Illegal traffickers are people that are taking advantage of the situation. They are looking out for their personal benefit and they are making offers to people that may be naive.
On Wednesday afternoon, customs offices were crowded by a wave of Salvadoran migrants that in a short period of time traveled around 120 kilometers to the border with Guatemala.
So we're going to return to our first story. We are being joined live by our correspondent in New York, Jorge Hastoso, who's been closely following the UN meeting and the historic vote against the U.S. blockade of Cuba. Jorge, thank you so much for joining us. Could you tell us what has happened on this very important day for Cuba?
It did happen, Eugenie, a fantastic victory for Cuba once again. It's the 27th year in a row that the large, overwhelming world community vote against that blockade that the U.S. has imposed to Cuba almost 60 years ago. This time, out of the 193 countries of the world, 190 voted in favor of Cuba. That means that voted against the blockade of the United States, even though the U.S. this time was trying to create something that the foreign minister of Cuba, Bruno Rodriguez, called it tampering with a resolution, introducing 8 amendments in trying to create, according to Mr. Rodriguez, distraction and more adherence of other countries of the world to the U.S. version. Before, given the fact that those amendments were trying to aim about the issue of human rights, Mr. Rodriguez was talking here in the General Assembly and said that the United States does not have moral authority to question human rights in general, and even less in Cuba. And he mentioned, for example, the incredible toll in terms of human lives that the blockade is doing among Cubans, for example, in terms of medicine, but also he went into what's going on with human rights in the U.S. and he mentioned a laundry list of issues that are really showing that the United States it has a large pending matter, a large amount of issues to resolve internally rather than to put their nose in what's going on in other countries. And he mentioned, for example, that the way that he's trying to blockade countries that they cannot manage to dominate. He mentioned in that case Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Bolivia. So bottom line is, once again, and this time with an administration of Donald Trump, the U.S. was trying to play a new strategy to see if they can manage not to feel so isolated in the world. Again, this issue that is having about 60 years of age, trying to impose a non-stop blockade in order to try to overthrow the government of Cuba. Once again, for Cuba, this is a large victory. Eugenie.
We thank you so much for that report, Jorge Hastoso, and we do apologize to our viewers. Jorge is also obviously in a very windy space, and that would distort the audio a little bit. We're going to take a short break now. Don't go away.
With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud, amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
Welcome back. The first batch of U.S. troops has arrived at a base in Texas as part of what the government calls the Patriot Faithful operation against the migrant caravan. The U.S. Defense Department has confirmed that over 5,000 soldiers will be dispatched to the Mexican border this week. On Wednesday, U.S. President Donald Trump said that the total number of troops could reach as high as 15,000. The Trump administration said it will not let the migrants enter U.S. territory.
As far as the caravan is concerned, our military is out. We have about 5,008. We'll go up to anywhere between 10 and 15,000 military personnel on top of Border Patrol, ICE, and everybody else at the border. Nobody's coming in. We're not allowing people to come in. If you look at what happened in Mexico 2 days ago, with the roughness of these people in the second caravan that's been forming, and also, frankly, in the first caravan, and now they have one forming in El Salvador, and we are thinking very seriously, immediately stopping aid to those countries, because, frankly, they're doing nothing for the American people.
Mexico's Interior Minister has asked the United States to respect its migrant policy. Alfonso Navarrete Preda said undocumented migrants are not criminals.
Their strong desire to reach the United States of America are fueled by their need to escape very adverse conditions. There is a very xenophobic attitude towards migration, which is not being seen in other parts of our hemisphere. And it is because they are living in a moment of wider political conjuncture in the United States, with midterm elections ahead. This often generates political controversy, when what is actually needed is humanitarian aid.
A court in Ecuador has ordered the preventative detention for 5 journalists who used to work under the former president, Rafael Correa. One of them, the journalist Marco Antonio Bravo, was the head of the country's first news agency. He condemned it as political persecution. He says there is no evidence to link him to any corruption. And in a tweet, Bravo showed the exact moment he presented himself to the police in Quito. His family, including his 5-year-old daughter, are seen with him.
Here I am, President Moreno. You are destroying a family with your political hate against all of us who have worked with President Rafael Correa. I blame you on everything my family is going through. I am leaving my 5-year-old daughter.
A court in Peru has ordered the detention of the opposition leader, Keiko Fujimori. Judge Richard Concepcion Carhuanco convicted Fujimori to 36 months of preventative detention. She is going to be transferred to the Penitentiary Establishment of Women. She's going to be moved from the National Penitentiary Institute headquarters to a women's prison in Lima. People for and against the court's decision protested in the capital of Peru. Cheers and jeers were heard from supporters and critics of Keiko Fujimori as they took to the streets of Lima after the order to arrest her was announced.
It makes me very sad because today the criminality, the persecution, the witch hunt have come out victorious. They are the ones who have won.
As citizens, we have come to express that what the judge is doing is a good thing. It's enforcing the rights of all Peruvians, and in this case, as the Fujimoristas don't like what one's saying, they act with aggression, hitting people with their sticks, throwing eggs, throwing water, insulting.
Brazil's President-elect Jair Bolsonaro has announced his plans to reduce the number of ministries from the current 29 to 15 or 16. He wants to merge the Agriculture and Environment ministries, a decision heavily criticized by environmentalists. This is part of his economic program that also includes the privatization of most of the state companies, including Petrobras. Bolsonaro said he will also cut taxes on businesses. And the Brazilian judge, Sergio Moro, has agreed to be the Minister of Justice under the President-elect Jair Bolsonaro's new administration. After a meeting with Bolsonaro, Moro confirmed the news. Sergio Moro is the judge who sentenced the former president, Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva, to 12 years in prison. And Guyana's government is denying reports that its nationals living in Trinidad and Tobago were being denied support as they grapple with the recent flooding in the Twin Island. Foreign Affairs Minister Carl Greenwich, who's also the acting Prime Minister, dismissed the opposition suggestion. He says the country's embassies in Port of Spain is providing services to affected Guyanese nationals. Meanwhile, fresh flood fears have arisen in Trinidad, with a yellow adverse weather alert still in effect. 24 archaeological sites have been found submerged in Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. An underwater museum is proposed to be built in one of them.
Titicaca is the highest navigable lake in the world. Located at 4,000 meters above sea level, more than 2,000 years ago, several cultures were located around it. The most impressive was the Tiahuanacota. Many of its buildings are below water.
It has been detected 24 underwater sites. There are two kinds of places. The housing settlements are one of them. The lake has dry between 27 and 22 meters, and those settlements are at the shore.
The second kind of underwater archaeological sites are sacred places, where ceremonies took place and the Inca authorities placed their offerings, gold, silver objects, and precious metals.
Under the lake, we have found clays, pieces of gold, props to do the textiles, and also combs and other accessories of women. Also the shape of their houses, human settlements. We are not going to exhibit all the pieces.
Ojelaya is one of the largest underwater archaeological sites. There is proposed to build an underwater museum with an investment of $10 million. The 13 municipalities that border the lake will also take part.
There will also be imitations from the pre-Inca culture. Over 10,000 pieces we have found only in this sector. All of the research we have done thanks to the UNESCO and Belgian cooperation that they have been discovered under 10% from the Tiahuanacota culture.
The decision to study the underwater archaeological in the sacred Inca lake has generated a new subject area, the underwater archaeology. The Public University of La Paz has already graduated the first promoted group. They are 5 women and 1 man.
We'll take a short break now. Stay with us.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur. Welcome back. Workers at Google are going on a worldwide strike in protest against the company's treatment of women. Staff at the multinational technology company will demand key changes in the way sexual misconduct allegations are dealt with. Among their demands are an end to forced arbitration, which would allow victims to sue in court. The walkout comes a week after allegations surfaced of sexual misconduct by the Android software creator Andy Rubin.
I decided to coordinate this Dublin gathering as one of the many Google sites that are walking out today in solidarity with anybody who has experienced any form of sexual harassment or misconduct in our workplace.
I'm walking out along with other colleagues in support of anyone in any workplace who has been harassed, and to ensure that perpetrators are not protected and not rewarded.
El Salvador's President Salvador Sanchez-Cerén has met with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Beijing. It is the first time that a Salvadorian president has made an official visit to China. Both sides have signed agreements of cooperation in technology and innovation. El Salvador is the third Latin American country in the past 2 years to switch alliances from Taiwan to China. And now let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines around the world.
The black box from the Lion Air jet that crashed into the Sea of Indonesia has been recovered, along with part of the jet's fuselage. The black box will be key to revealing why the plane with 189 passengers on board nosedived into the Java Sea. There were no survivors. The murder of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi was ordered by high-level officials. That is according to the spokesperson of Turkey's ruling Justice and Development Party, Ömer Salik. The crisis in Saudi Arabia continues as the journalist's killing remains unsolved.
This action couldn't be performed without the permission from high-level officials. The way the act was organised, the fact that it was pre-planned, which the Saudi prosecutor told us, it shows that it was deliberate. The question now is when this brutal crime, as our prosecutor says, that he was killed immediately after he entered the consulate and his body dismembered, was planned. Who performed it and who gave the orders? We have to find that out.
An all-eye zone and a ban on military drills have taken effect as the two Koreas end hostile acts near the heavily fortified border. A 40-kilometer non-fly zone has been established near the border. The measure was part of a military accord reached last month. It includes a halt to all hostile acts.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, tellusyourtv.net/English. And for our viewers in Africa, remember we are on Starstat channel 461 in South Africa and channel 539 in Nigeria. But everyone can follow us on social media because we are on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you for watching.